I'd like to begin by expressing my appreciation to Brother Nashid, Brother Najib, and to the members of the Clifton Masjid and to the members of the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center who have been helpers to make sure that this event would become a success. And I say to you, my dear brothers and sisters, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, assalamu alaikum. The topic that we are going to be discussing tonight is it's a strange kind of topic for many, but it's a topic that we have to begin to take a look at, understand, begin to digest it, because we need to know how Islam was established for African Americans in America. What happened? There was a brother by the name of Lewis, and I learned a lot from him. In fact, he told me that before he became a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that he was attracted to the Islam that was being taught by those who were called Ahmadis. Yes. They were here. Yes. They were teaching Islam. But it really didn't catch on with African Americans, like the Islam that was brought by Mr. Farad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The establishment of al-Islam in America for African Americans, it was a movement moving from Mr. Farad to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and eventually to the leadership of Imam Muhammad, as has been mentioned by Brother Nashid. And it won't be easy to understand unless you begin to see it as a strategy, a concealed scheme, a deliberate strategy as a means to bring Islam and, in a sense, smuggle the Quran into the minds and hearts of African American people. There was a man by the name of Mr. Farad. You've heard that, but he had a lot of names. He was Mr. Farad. He was W.D. Muhammad. He was W.F. Muhammad. But all of these names were not his real names, they were assumed names. But he had a lot of names. And he wasn't an African American, he wasn't a Negro, he wasn't a colored person, he wasn't any of those names or descriptions that they gave us. And his place of origin, where he was from, was on the Indian subcontinent, in India. It was before 1947, so the nation of Pakistan had not yet been established. So he was from India. And it is said that he had some bad experiences in America in terms of how he was treated. And we believe that he had some bad experiences back in India because of how the Great Britain was treating the people of India. I think we've seen the movie Gandhi and how they were treated. And so Mr. Farad, he sympathized with African Americans. He looked at his situation, he looked at our situation, and he sympathized with us. And he wanted to come to America to help the African American, to give the African American a better life, to help change the conditions of African American people. But he also wanted to do something that was more important than that, something more valuable than that. He wanted to use us, he wanted to use the African American people as a means, as a voice to speak to white America. He also wanted to use the African American people as a voice to speak to the Islamic world. And by producing something as strange as he did, it got the attention of the white Christian world, and it definitely got the attention of the Muslim world. Mr. Farad, what he created was a living theater called the Lost Found Nation of Islam in the wilderness of North America. This was a strange, new thing, unlike any of the religions on earth. It was a strange new thing, and he did this again to get the attention of a white Christian world and to get the attention of the Islamic world. How did Mr. Farad do what he did? Now, his name was Farad. It was pronounced F-A-R-A-D, but it was pronounced Farad. Obligatory. What is obligatory? And how did Mr. Farad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, how did they come to meet? We'll start with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was living in Sandersville, Georgia. And in Sandersville, Georgia, he received no more than a third grade education. And a third grade education in Georgia wasn't close to what a third grade education would have been in New York or Chicago, one of the other cities. So it had even less value. While in Sandersville, Georgia, and it was pretty common because most of the children down there, they couldn't go to school because they had to go out into the field and work with their parents in order to survive. So they didn't get too far in school because they had to go to work. While in Sandersville, Georgia, and in time, he met Clara Evans. Clara Evans, and then he married her. Then the next step was that they wanted to have a better life for themselves. Many African Americans looking for a better life for themselves, better financial situation for themselves, they migrated to the north. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he went to the black bottom of Detroit, Michigan. Now, at that particular time, you know, there was the car industry and whatnot, but something happened. Something happened during that time, something called the Great Depression. And when the Great Depression struck, the situation for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was worse than when he was in Sandersville, Georgia. You know, if the Depression had Caucasians, white folks, jumping out of windows committing suicide, you know it must have been much harder and worse for the black man. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he said that during that period of time, he told this to his son, Wallace Muhammad. He said, son, all we ate was peanuts. And he said, sometime I was so hungry, I ate the peanut shell and everything. During that time, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, being the proud man that he was, he couldn't take care of his family. So not being able to take care of his family, he turned to the liquor bottle. And he would just go out and he would just drink himself into intoxication, into drunkenness. Just hanging out, being with his buddies, he wouldn't even come home to eat. He felt so ashamed that he couldn't take care of his family, he wouldn't even come home to eat. And his wife, Clara, she would have to go out into the street and get him. And with her little self, I think Imam said she won't weigh no more about 115 pounds or something like that. She would have to carry him home on her shoulder. And then she would drop him off in the bed where he would sleep until the morning. Then there was a friend of hers that had gone and heard the silk peddler. That was Mr. Farad. He was selling silk door to door in Detroit. And some of the designs, the fabric, he was telling the African American people that basically this is some of the designs, these are some of the clothes that you wore during your great time, your great history in Africa. So this friend, he told Claire, I want you to come and hear him. You should come in here, you should come with me and hear him. She did. They went to hear Mr. Farad and him talk about their greatness, the greatness that you had on the continent of Africa that you've lost. And when she heard it, she said something that any loving wife would say, not thinking about herself. She said, this can help my husband. And then she went to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and she said, there's this man, he's talking at a particular home, and I want you to go hear him. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he said, okay, I'll go with you. He went and he heard Mr. Farad and Mr. Farad's message. After he heard Mr. Farad's message, he turned to his wife and he said, Clara, I want you to go home and get rid of all the pork in the house. So her, not wanting to obey her husband, she did that. She obeyed him, technically speaking, but she was thinking about some of her poor friends. And they hadn't become Muslims, so she gave the pork to them. And I don't think she ever told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But she did obey him. She got rid of the pork in the house. And she told her son Wallace years later, she said, after he heard Mr. Farad, your father did not take one more drink for the rest of his life, not even one drop. He accepted it and he became a strong follower immediately. Mr. Farad said that he came as a thief in the night. He said, I came as a thief in the night. This is in the Bible. He came as a thief in the night to steal us back from those who stole us from Africa, but even more so for those who stole us from God. There's a verse in the Bible that says, will a man rob God? Yes, even as you have robbed me of this whole people. But he really didn't as much come to steal us back to Africa, but he came to steal us back to our past religious traditions and to our Creator. He told the African Americans, if you accept what I bring you, I'm going to give you money, good homes, and friendship in all walks of life. Now you're talking about during the Depression. African Americans ain't have no money. They was living in the worst of homes. And I got something that I want to read to you, how bad the homes was. And this was from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's daughter. Right. And she just recently passed. May Allah have mercy upon her, forgive her sins, and grant her paradise. Amen. And this is what she reported. She said, when Master Farad came, everything got better for us. We finally moved into a house with doors. We finally moved into a house with doors and running water. We had enough to eat, and life for us was better all around. So he said money, good homes, friendship, and all walks of life. He didn't bring anything spiritual to the African Americans, because African Americans, we were already very, very spiritual people. In fact, Mr. Farad said we might have been a little too spiritual. But you can understand that, because for centuries, not for years, not for decades, but for centuries, the only one that African Americans could turn to, because the whole world had rejected us. The whole world had basically put us in a subhuman category. The whole world had mistreated us. The only one that we could turn to was Almighty God. But he understood that we had material needs in our life. And the historical oppression and control of our lives by white people, by the white race, really produced low self-esteem among the African Americans. There was a prevalence in the psyche of African Americans, this low self-esteem. To remedy that, Mr. Farad, it was like a catechism, a lesson that was asked and then an answer was given. He asked the question, who is the original man? The answer was, the original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, cream of the planet Earth, father of civilization, God of the universe. Now, after all of that, African Americans say, I knew that white man was hiding something from me. I didn't know he was hiding all that. You mean I'm all of that? Following this man, he done told me the truth about myself. So, but this was just to bring, it was an exaggeration of our identity. An exaggeration to our ego. To offset the damage that had been done. It's been said basically the human being progresses from 0, then he goes to 1 in terms of his evolution, his development and growth as a human being. For the African American, we were below 0. We were less than 0. Mr. Farad also said that he was dressed in the clothes of the cave, talking about the white man, in terms of how he behaved. He deserved to be called that because he behaved like a caveman, like a savage, in terms of especially how he treated African American people. He said that he was coming in the dress of the cave. He said he was wearing dyed garments, but one day we would see him in his holy robe. What did he mean by he was coming in the dress of the cave and he was wearing dyed garments? It meant he was using the white man's methods. In the Nation of Islam, we call it tricknology, a science of tricks. He was using the white man's methods against him. It was a reversal of white supremacy to black supremacy. It was a reversal of black inferiority and dehumanization to white inferiority and to the dehumanization of white people by saying they were not even human beings, they were a race of devils. It was a reverse psychology. Somebody put it in the language, he was fighting fire with fire. What did he mean by he said that he was wearing dyed garments and that one day you would see him in his holy robes? His holy robes meant that one day he would return to the correct idea and expressions that is found in the religion of Islam. And his dyed garments, which means he had to step outside of his dress as a Muslim in order to do the things that he did. Because the things that he did would not be acceptable in Islam. But he did what he thought he had to do because he saw it being as something that had a good intent and a good purpose. You see, racism is based on a hoax. To legitimize it, you have to lie. Mr. Farad, he mirrored the Caucasian with his hoax, and he did it with esoterics, he did it with satires, and he did it with myth. Mr. Farad, he called us Asiatics. Why did he call us Asiatics? We were from Africa. He called us black and he called us Asiatics. Because he knew the white man had given us a picture in Africa, which is a jungle filled with savages, retarded blacks, retarded human beings, that can be taken over by what? One white man. One white man ruled all of Africa. And he didn't have any guns, had no tanks, had no planes. Only thing he did was holler. Flying from limb to limb, right? Flying from tree to tree on vines. But he conquered all of the natives and became like a god, became like a deity to them. Now, I know it affected me too. I remember going to the movies. I wasn't even 10 years old yet. And I remember seeing the movie Tarzan. And Tarzan was beating up all the natives. He was beating up all the Africans. And then one looked like they was trying to sneak up on him with a spear. And I found myself saying, "Look out, Tarzan!" Messed me up. And I was rooting for my enemy. They had done a job on us.
That's right.
And you know, the movies, they can create who's going to be the protagonist and who's going to be the antagonist. Who's going to be the good guy and who's going to be the bad guy. The movies can do that. They do that quite well. So Mr. Farad, because of this picture of Africa we were given, beating drums and running around half naked, acting crazy. When it came to Africa, you know what he said? He said Africa is not Africa. He said, in fact, America is not America. All of it was once called Asia. The white man just changed the name. Said your origin is a black Asiatic. That's who you really are. And Mr. Farad, he was only looking for African Americans who were angry and dissatisfied. African Americans who were not comfortable in America. African Americans who didn't want to work with the white man or continue to be somebody that was fully participating in the white world. He only wanted to dissatisfy. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he once said, only 100% dissatisfaction to bring about 100% change. You have to be completely dissatisfied in order to really change yourself. So Mr. Farad told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, don't get educated blacks, don't get educated so-called Negroes, get the ones that are not educated. He said the ones that are educated, like W.B. Du Bois and the talented, he said they are the bloodsuckers of the poor. And they are really helpers and supporters to the real bloodsuckers of the poor, who are the white race. But Mr. Farad, being smart like he was, for them educated African Americans to come into his orbit and listen to his teachings, they would have questioned a lot of what he was talking about, a lot of his fallacies and a lot of his contradictions. He knew that, so they weren't even allowed. But a whole lot of people weren't allowed. If you weren't an African American, you could not come into the temple. I don't care if you was from Africa, Jamaica, right? If you wasn't an African American at that particular time, you wasn't allowed. He was trying to protect us from any and all influences other than himself. But what Mr. Farad was presenting, it really wasn't new. What made it seem new was that he just packaged it differently. He packaged it more effectively. He packaged more effectively the things that were already being said. He just turned up the volume on what was already being said by other African American leaders. He just repackaged it. I think the young people would say it was a remix. And that's what it was. And it was a powerful, synthesized mixture. Mr. Farad told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that the black man was God. But before he told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that the black man was God, there was a man by the name of Father Divine, was already telling his Christian followers, he told his Christian followers that they should see Christianity as the black man's religion. And he told them that if you want to see Jesus Christ, look at me. And there's a whole lot of African Americans that wanted to see Jesus up close. So that's what he told them. And he named himself Father Divine. Mr. Farad was not the first one to get the white man to repent his ways by calling them devils. There was a slave, her name was Julia. And what did she say? She said, white people look like God in the face, but act like the devils in their hearts. Here's a woman wondering if the white race followers of Jesus Christ, people made in the image of God, are devils. You know, I believe this description of the white man being the devil, I believe it was more prevalent than what we knew. My mother is from she was from South Carolina. Now, South Carolina, we know, was the first state that seceded from the Union. South Carolina is also the place that the first battle took place for the Civil War. But what happened was this. I was having an experience. I was home from college, working at Kraft Foods, climbing into one of those big stainless steel tanks in which they was, I guess, getting the salad dressing together and whatever, and I had to clean those out. So it was an 11 to 7 job, third shift job. But they, had a cafeteria. So in going to the cafeteria, the management was talking to some African Americans, older African American, mid-30s and 40s, and was talking to them in a very condescending, disrespectful way. And these men, they couldn't argue back because they couldn't afford to lose their jobs. But I was just 18 years old. So I don't know where this came from, but I just bust into the cafeteria and just started talking to them and was telling them, you can't talk to these men like that. And some other words that I can't remember, but I know the whole cafeteria got quiet. So anyway, I went home and I told my mother about it. I said, Mama, why they act like that? Why these people act like that? Why they treat these people like that? You know what she said? Because they the devil. Now she never been to Muhammad's temple. But that's what came out of her mouth. So I believe a lot of African Americans, that's why it wasn't hard for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to convince him of that one, that the white man is the devil. Oh yeah. That was easy to digest. Then there was Marcus Garvey of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Marcus Garvey estimated that Marcus Garvey had 1 million followers. 1 million men and women from the United States, from the Caribbean, and from Africa as his followers. He is the one that said, up you mighty nation, you can accomplish what you will. That was also introduced into the Nation of Islam. He had a Back to Africa movement, but it's misunderstood, his Back to Africa movement. If you read his teachings closely, he wasn't telling us to physically go back to Africa. He meant that we should identify strongly with Africa, that we should reconnect with Africa, our ancestors, and reconnect with that continent. That's what he really meant. And eventually we saw this in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, where you saw African American reaching across the water to the hand of an African. You saw an African reaching over the water and connecting with the hand of an African American. That was following that same concept that Marcus Garvey had, that there needs to be a stronger connection between African Americans and the people of Africa. The idea of independent schools came from Booker T. Washington, as well as the drill that we did in FOI came from Booker T. Washington. I believe the sisters had drill too, the MGT. Mr. Farad could also be identified with Noble Drew Ali in the Moorish American Science Temple. Do you know the first head covering that we wore? The first head covering that we wore, many don't know this, in the Nation of Islam was the Moroccan fez. You might see them on shrines. That's the first headpiece that we wore, was the Moroccan fez. And like Noble Drew Ali, he had his own brand of Islam. But it wasn't an Islam that was being accepted by the rest of the Muslim world. So he could identify with that. So Mr. Farad, he studied our life and histories and put this powerful package together, and he called it magnetism. And it had a very, very powerful effect, very strong attraction, had a very strong magnetic power, very strong magnetic power. If you've ever listened to Malcolm speak, you understand that magnetism. If you've ever heard Minister Farrakhan talk, you've heard that magnetism. If you ever heard Imam W. Muhammad talk in the 1950s, you heard that magnetism. Many don't know when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad sent Imam W. Muhammad to Philadelphia to become the minister of that temple, the brief time he was there, he wasn't there that long, he actually was responsible for 500 converts. So I know about that magnetism. It got me. It was mesmerizing. So if you ask, were you hypnotized? No, I was magnetized. It was something that would hold your attention. I'm telling you, it would hold your attention. You couldn't think about nothing else. And energy, magnetism is a form of energy. Energy is transferable. You know, you can take a magnet and then take another piece of steel and then take that magnet and rub it against that piece of steel, and it becomes magnetized in time. So it began to spread. This magnetism was so powerful that it reformed alcoholics, it reformed drug addicts, it reformed gangsters, it reformed thieves, it reformed robbers, it reformed pimps, it reformed dope dealers. It had such a pull, it pulled them away. The magnetic pull was so strong, it pulled them away from those immoral habits and cleaned them up and made them morally upright. Mr. Farad, he also chose a role for himself. And what was that role? Mr. Farad put it like this. He said, and no help came to them, that is African Americans, until the coming of the Son of Man in the person of W.D. Farad. When he said that, what did the Honorable Elijah Muhammad see? Now, you know the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he came from a Christian home. His father was a Christian minister. He didn't like the way his father preached, though. He said, he told his father, y'all ain't now teaching Christianity like it ought to be taught. The kind of Christianity that he liked, maybe how Moses was talking to Pharaoh. But when Jesus Christ, he said to his disciples, in terms of the Son of Man, he said, who do you say that I, the Son of Man, am? And then Peter went on, he said, you are the Son of the living God, and you are the God. You are the Son of God and the living God. But he talked about himself through inference. He didn't say he was God, but he just inferred that. He established his identity and his role, but he didn't do it directly. He had no personal interest in being called anything big. He didn't have any interest in big titles. On the other hand, he had an interest in leaving a big picture of himself with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would be in position of power himself and have a great influence. No African American would have followed the Honorable Elijah Muhammad if he said, I am the messenger of a teacher. He said, no, I am the messenger of God who appeared in the person of Master Farad Muhammad. That got their attention. Father Divine wouldn't have had any followers if he would say, I'm just another preacher. So they used that as a means in order to attract the African Americans. Especially, he was asking the African Americans to give up your complete life in connection to the white man and come into your own identity and be the self that God created you to be. Another proof of him not needing these titles, one of his lessons, he said, Herod, learn the languages, learn the lessons your teacher wants to hear from you. He referred to himself as a teacher. There was another incident by Imam W.D. Muhammad, was with his mother, when Imam got put out of the temple for the second time. He always got put out because he didn't agree with his father in terms of his father's idea of God. Imam didn't agree with that. And because of that, he got put out. So on his way out, his mother was pleading with him. She said, please, son, go back in there and tell your father that you're wrong, because she didn't want to see the family split up like that. And it caused the Imam to say, Mama, did he ever tell you that he was God? She hesitated for a while. She looked like she was straining to think. And she said, no, he didn't. He never told us that he was God. In fact, he said prophet was too big a name for him. So for a man to tell us that prophet is too big a name for him, and you expect for me to accept him and see him and say he's God? But the Imam said he saw the pain in his mother's face, and it pained him too. And although it upset him, he did, he said, I put out the fire because I saw the pain in my mother's face. And he just left. The only picture, and we've seen it, the only picture that he left of himself, that's the only picture he left of himself. What was he doing? He was reading the Quran. What is God doing reading the Quran? But these are things that we overlooked. We didn't see this. In fact, there was a time when he left, I think in 1934, he left the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he told his followers, he said, you have Elijah, now you don't need me. When would God ever say you don't need me? So there were certain things that were there that we just didn't see. It was hidden in plain sight. So the magnetism in us being held in the prison cell of Mr. Farad's language environment, that's what it was. It was to be temporary, to hold us captive until the Quran came to free us. In fact, this was the prayer of Mr. Farad. Imam mentioned, yes, he prayed to Allah. This was his prayer. He prayed to Allah that his strategy would work. He left a hint in the places of worship. He called them temples. Muslim places of worship are not called temples. Why did he call it a temple? It was a play on temporary. He was saying, what I am giving you is temporary. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad even said that. He said, my job is not to teach you Islam. My job is just to clean you up. There was one imam put it like this. He said, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us a 40-year wudu. And Imam W. Muhammad then came and led us in salat. And that's what he said. He said, no, I'm not, the one that's coming after you is going to teach you the religion. I'm just here to clean you up. Also, in temporary is a play on the word tempo. Tempo. Tempo refers to time, the timing, the rate of movement of something. In the Bible, Jesus Christ said this: destroy the temple, and I will restore it in 3 days. And remember, Mr. Farad saw himself in the role of Jesus Christ because he knew Jesus Christ had a tremendous influence, a great deal of power with African Americans. So this is the role, not that he believed this of himself, but this is the role that he understood he should play. Mr. Farad planted the seeds for the destruction of his own works. The objective of the strategy was to break us free of the magnetism when the time came for us to be broke free of that magnetism. But if the strategy didn't accomplish that, then he prayed for the destruction of it. And he totally hid himself from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad at this time, yet he kept communicating with him. This same man, communicating in a very hidden, covert manner, continued to influence the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. It was this man who told him that he should have more wives. Remember, during the time, the movie of Malcolm, and basically the controversy that went on with Malcolm, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you must remember, he was a man of Scripture, and in Scripture, in the Bible, is a man of the Bible. In the Bible, you see some of the prophets, many have had many wives. But there was Mr. Farad who said that he should have more wives. Also told him he should do certain things, and he did those things. And these things brought about the downfall. Once again, Mr. Farad, he wanted to make sure that what he had established would be temporary. Just hold us in that magnetic pull until the Quran came. He told Imam W. Muhammad, this is what his father told the son around 1965. He said, son, after this happened, the good record is broken. The good record is no more. And he told Minister Farrakhan and others, we're going to lose everything. The nation is going to fall. But he said it will rise again. There was a gradual movement towards the Quran, and at the same time, a gradual movement producing a leader, an imam, for the African American people to teach us from the Quran. He told, now you can see the stages of this movement. When Claire Muhammad was pregnant with her 7th child, he told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Mr. Farad told the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he said, if you have a son, give him my name and raise him to help us in our work. Also, Mr. Farad, he wrote his name in the home of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad on a wall. And you couldn't see it if the kitchen door was closed because it covered it up. But as soon as you opened the kitchen door, you would see it there. And what was there was Wallace D. He was sensitizing Imam Muhammad, and he was sensitizing the family that Wallace was somebody special. Because it just happened to be a boy. They didn't have no ultrasounds back then. He just happened to be a boy. It just happened to be a son. And he named him after Mr. Farad. That's why he got the name Wallace D. Muhammad. Also, when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was in prison, he was in prison for the first time they jailed him for basically influencing something in the delinquency, adding to the delinquency of minors. Then they imprisoned him for draft evasion. I think he was about 45, 46 years old. But during that period of time, Claire Muhammad came to visit him. And he gave Clara Muhammad a verse from the Quran, and he told her, read this to Wallace. Wallace at that time was somewhere between 10 to 13 years of age. And it was from Surah Luqman. Surah Luqman, right? Luqman's advice to his son. And it said this: if your parents strive to get you to believe something concerning me, that is God, for which you have no knowledge, base to support it, don't follow them. Don't believe what they're saying, but keep good company with them in the world. It means to continue to be a nice, obedient, respectful son to your parents, but just don't buy the lie they're trying to sell you. On Savior's Day, whenever the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would walk into Savior's Day, February 26th, each and every year, he didn't walk in with message to the black man under his arm on how to eat to live. He had the Quran. And he walked in at a brisk pace. And he told us, he said, this is the book. This is the book. This book is greater than any book. And as Nashid had mentioned, take this book and put it in the highest place in your home. But don't read it yet. You're not ready for it. He also got a teacher for Imam Warathuddin Muhammad, a Quranic Arabic teacher. For him, his son, his younger son, Akbar, and for the members of the school. He was a Palestinian by the name of Jamal Diab. And he taught them Quranic Arabic as a result of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad looking for and recruiting somebody that would be able to teach Quranic Arabic in the way he wanted it taught. Because he had several teachers, but the only one that really worked out that he was comfortable with was Jamil Diab. And as mentioned, also the only picture he left of himself was basically him reading the Quran. It was one of the lessons, and I can only paraphrase it. The lesson says this, in the paraphrase. It says, tell the students to study hard, to solve the problems. And the reward would be a family Quran. A family Quran. So we want to get to a conclusion. We say the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he was not Islamically correct in his teaching of religion that he said was Islam, but he really was truly Islamic in his moral teachings and in his program. Al-Islam requires that Muslims belong to community life, and Muslims be about establishing their own identity as a community. You know, Imam W. Muhammad was charged as the one who destroyed the programs of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's incorrect. The focus on community life and development, community development, that never changed. You come into economic strength that was established during the time of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, an educational institution that was established during the time of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to have moral excellence that was established during the time of the Honorable, that never changed. In fact, the Imam said, I just come to continue what my father started. He just changed. What he did change, he just changed the incorrect thinking of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's followers, moving them from the racial focus and having a strongly materialistic, because I remember during that particular time, even God was materialized. In fact, the derogatory term that I remember that the Prophet would have to say he was a spook. So that was removed. But that was because Mr. Farad wanted to focus on the focus on the material, because like I said, he saw the African Americans as being imbalanced, too much spirituality. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad encouraged his son to be a man of scripture, not the Bible, but the Quran. There were ministers that complained, dear Holy Apostle, we teaching the Bible, what is Wallace teaching? And he told him, Wallace is going to teach the Quran. I prepared Wallace to teach the Quran. That's why I got that Quranic Arabic teacher for him. and he prepared leaders to accept Wallace and al-Islam. I remember during the last time he came to Savior's Day, he pointed up on the podium, on the rostrum, and he said, and he pointed to these brothers, he said, "These are your brothers." And for me, I'm just looking, I say, ain't nothing but a bunch of white men up there. But he was sensitizing us. I believe they were Arabs and, from other nations. They were Muslims from other nations. But he was making that transition, helping make that transition. And Mr. Farad, he gave his purpose when he said he came as a thief in the night to steal us back, not to Africa again, but to our past religious tradition and to God. He knew that the Quran and the right teaching would redeem our life. He said he came on July 4th, right? July 4th, 1930. What is July 4th? That's Independence Day. He was telling us, I am coming here for your independence. Independence from what? He had seen the state of the Muslim world and wanted to ensure that we would not come under their mind and their influence, that we would be independent in our thinking, and that as a people we would have our own mind. Imam Muhammad made this statement. He said, we cannot make the kind of contribution we need to make to the African American, to America, and to the Muslim world unless we be independent thinkers. So we say in our conclusion all along, the destination that Mr. Farad had input into the GPS of the vehicle called the Nation of Islam was the Quran. That was the destination all along. And to have a teacher from among the African American people who would be well qualified and independent in his thinking to teach them from the Quran and from the life example of Muhammad the Prophet, the prayers and the peace be upon him. It was a strange, strange and mysterious journey. But as strange and mysterious as it was, it worked. Peace to you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.